This is another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast. I'm Jared.
I'm Brandon.
And All Out was this past week. Some big surprises, and WWE's returning to Madison Square Garden on September the 10th, one day before the 20th anniversary of September the 11th. We'll talk that and so much more as the Heel to the Face podcast starts right now.
Fans celebrate with me from Rome to Rochester.
Bad luck to be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
So this is another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast. You can follow the show at Heel to the Face on Twitter. And make sure to follow Brandon at Icebreaker21, myself at K-Rock Jared, as we're coming off a big week in the world of professional wrestling. Most importantly, a big week in AEW. And well, I guess you could say that's all of professional wrestling, because anybody who is competition to WWE makes it a big week in professional wrestling, because that doesn't happen often. And we've been talking about, is AEW legit competition to WWE for a long time now. But they've got some stars. They not just brought in Bryan Danielson, which we saw, but without any further ado, no big wait, Adam Cole made his debut. Ruby Soho, don't forget about her, Ruby Riott from WWE. She made her debut in AEW. There's talks right now that Kevin Owens' contract is coming to an end, but we'll start with AEW. We'll start with All Out. I want to just bring this to you, Brandon. This is how we started when we had a little back and forth on Twitter. I did not watch the show live, but obviously I knew a lot of the surprises that were going to come up. And listen, I love the surprises. It's good to have surprises, but here's my issue with AEW so far is that the shows have been good, surprises have been good, but we got to get to a point where we're done with surprises. And the reason I bring that up is because Ruby Soho made her debut in the Casino Battle Royale at All Out. And I got to be honest with you, and this is no disrespect to the women, it just doesn't have that. It didn't get my heart racing when Ruby Soho made her debut, because we just keep seeing debut after debut, and it's kind of taken away a little bit of the luster. I don't want to say they should have waited on Bryan Danielson, obviously, but we knew it was coming, and CM Punk just made his debut about 2 weeks ago. So do you think they should be waiting out these people? Do you think they should just be bringing them all in? What do you think AEW should be doing when it comes to these debuts and to these guys, you know, the kind of the luster coming off of the big names? Because, you know, like I said, I was very surprised when Matt Hardy came into AEW. That was a big deal. I loved it. And then now it's like, okay, we get it. Bryan Danielson, we saw this coming. Like, is anybody really jumping out of their seats for that?
I mean, I think they are to an extent, because he has that creative freedom, and he even said in some of the most recent press conferences, interviews post his AEW debut, where Vince was I guess, I can't remember the exact words, so I'll kind of paraphrase it, I guess. So he was cautious with Bryan Danielson. He was very cautious with him. He didn't want to let Bryan Danielson use his full repertoire of his full skill set in the ring. And Bryan Danielson said, you know, pretty much was like, I want to number one, he wants to have more time with his family and still wrestle. Number two, he wants to have that creative freedom, which AEW does allow. So, I mean, from that perspective, it's a good thing for wrestling fans, because we're going to be able to see Bryan Danielson like he was at Ring of Honor. And the only thing I will say that I was disappointed in, and it's not on Tony Khan or AEW, is I was really hoping they were going to secure the rights to Final Countdown, which was Bryan Danielson's song famously in Ring of Honor. But reports are that it's every time Ring of Honor played that song at a pay-per-view, it was like a $50,000 bill sent to Europe, the band who created the song Final Countdown. So they made a different version of the Flight of the Valkyries, I think it is. So they made a different version, kind of a hip-hop version, which I actually got to tell you, I really did enjoy it, but I was really hoping to hear that Final Countdown song. That would have been cool. So from that perspective, I'm glad he's there. I was excited because I'm just excited for the prospects of his creative freedom, and also the matchups of the Kenny Omegas, the Christian Cages, you name the list. There's so many great competitors that I want to see him wrestle. So I'm excited. I will say, though, the surprise of the night was Adam Cole. Adam Cole, baby. He's there. I wasn't expecting that. When Kenny Omega was kind of cutting that promo at the end of the show, I thought, okay, here we go. Here comes Bryan Danielson. And then then you hear the music, and then you see the logo on the Tron, and oh no, it's Adam Cole, baby, and Adam Cole shows up, and the best part about this was he goes down to the ring. They had like a little quote unquote standoff, but most of us real smart wrestling fans, we know they got a good relationship. So then it was like a bromance. And then shortly after, when you think, okay, it's done, okay, I guess Bryan Danielson's not showing up tonight, maybe. Guess what? Bryan Danielson shows up, and now we got some good things coming up here. Bryan Danielson's going to be a lot of fun in AEW.
I just don't want all these wrestling shows for AEW to be overshadowed by, did you see who debuted? Did you see who came out? Because I think AEW, the big thing is CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole. They really can deliver. I think again, Christian Cage delivered it all out. I thought that was a great match. But again, the problem is it doesn't take away, in my eyes, essentially from the great matches. But in the sense of that these pay-per-views just keep being talked about, or like the Dynamites that speak talked about is who made their debut. Who's going to AEW, and not so much who, like, what you're actually going to do in AEW. The Yankees in baseball talk about, we got unlimited salary cap. Who we're bringing in? Well, who cares about who you're bringing in? Well, what are you doing with the guys you have? And again, not saying that AEW is doing negatives with the guys that they have. They're doing good things with them. They're putting on great matches. But the problem is just that the pay-per-views are not being remembered for the great matches. They're being remembered for who made the debut, who came out, who's the big surprise. Because that's what's happening in Impact Wrestling as well. These Slammiversaries, these Bound for Glory pay-per-views, they're all about, like, did you see the vignette? Did you see it could be EC3? It could be Big Cass. It could be the Machine Guns. That's all they're talking about at Impact Wrestling. They're also putting on some pretty good matches. Obviously not to the extent AEW is doing with the production and the crowds and all that good stuff. Maybe Impact will come along the line a little bit. They've got the big Bound for Glory pay-per-view coming up in front of fans. And speaking of that, they just announced it's going to be at 10 o'clock at night on October the 23rd. I kind of like that time. That's kind of the adult wrestling fan time. We get used to that with the UFC being a 10 o'clock at night spot. So I might actually be watching that pay-per-view live because it's on at that time. It's a Saturday night. You can kind of wind down. 7 o'clock on a Saturday night, I'm probably not going to give you that live. But 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday night, I might give you that time live. So that's good on Impact. They did it so they didn't go up against AEW Dynamite, which is taping that night as well for a special Saturday Night Dynamite. I don't know if that's because of the NBA on TNT, but that also creates some sort of interest for the fact that AEW is obviously going to contribute somehow on this Bound for Glory pay-per-view. Their logo was flashed across the screen, but to what extent they'll contribute to the fact that they are taping Dynamite right before it goes on the air from Las Vegas at 10 o'clock at night. But going back to AEW and just pretty much saying that, yes, I want these pay-per-views to be remembered for the matches and not for the debuts. It's fun when they're remembered for the debuts on occasion. Remember the Survivor Series that Sting came out and, other events like that in WWE, but they're just not all remembered for that. Obviously, SummerSlam this past year, same thing. Becky Lynch, Brock Lesnar. We want more, though. WWE's got a lot more history under their belt to be remembered for matches and for returns. AEW, most recently, it's just who's coming to AEW. Are they going to debut at this pay-per-view? Are they going to debut at that pay-per-view? And as for Bryan Danielson, as for CM Punk, I want to see him in the ring. Glad that we saw CM Punk in the ring at All Out. Thought he put on a great match with Darby Allin. Now let's get these guys in the ring. Adam Cole scheduled for September the 15th to make his debut. Not sure about Bryan Danielson, but let's get these guys in the ring. Let's get him some good storylines. And Bray Wyatt, great. If he goes to AEW, great. But no rush. We have great talent right now in AEW. Enough great talent that we shouldn't be sitting there being like, when's Braun Strowman coming? When's Bray Wyatt? We got enough.
Yeah, here's the thing. The talent, the cupboard's full. I mean, the pantry's full of talent. And I will say this. I think we're coming towards the end of these big surprises because there's only a couple names I can think of that I think are going to be – they're big names that I think are coming to AEW. There's three names in particular. You mentioned it. You mentioned the Bray Wyatt. He's coming to AEW. He's waiting for his non-compete, the 90-day non-compete. You have Kevin Owens, who – and by the beginning part of 2022 is going to be a free agent, and all points are pointing in that direction where he's going to AEW. He deleted a post talking about Mount Rushmore, which a lot of people caught on really quick, of a former Ring of Honor setup with the Young Bucks, among others. And Sami Zayn, I think, is also a part of that. But also, Sami Zayn's another name. I think Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, and Bray Wyatt are the three names you're going to see in AEW next. After that, I think it's just going to, like you said, I think now we're going to start focusing on storylines, good matches. I just want to get past these surprises for a little bit. We don't need surprises every pay-per-view. Let's just have good matches. Let's have good storylines. That's what it's all about. And I think we're going to get there. I think let's give it a few months. I think into WrestleMania season for WWE, I think we're going to be settled in. We're going to have these guys there. We're going to be ready to roll. I can't wait. And I got to tell you, something I found out after Adam Cole debuted. So all reports out there are pointing to Adam Cole. If he were to stay in WWE, he was going to be like the Malcolm Bivens to Keith Lee. He was going to be a manager. Adam Cole, a manager? Are you kidding me, Vince McMahon? What are you thinking?
That's the big thing with WWE right now. I don't know if we just kind of ignored it, but with AEW just doing what they're doing, it's putting a spotlight on all these real negatives that WWE's got going on, whether it's Karrion Kross and his outfit that nobody asked for, without Scarlett Bordeaux at his side. Obviously, hearing about Adam Cole as being a mouthpiece for Keith Lee, which would have been great for Keith Lee because they probably would have been doing something with him then versus what they're doing now. But as for Adam Cole being just, a manager, and just a lot of other storylines, potential storylines for people that are coming out that are really putting WWE in a negative light. One thing I wanted to actually bring up was a GCW wrestler by the name of Mark Sterling. And this is just a microcosm of what is going on with WWE and how it's kind of all coming out of what's going on in the WWE world about how ridiculous that they're being, and how even people like myself are thinking there must be some sort of plan, there must be some sort of behind the scenes thing. They're not really this ridiculous. Fans are just jumping down the throat of WWE, and they're not really like this. But according to Mark Sterling, they are really like this. Mark Sterling, a wrestler for GCW, was trying out to be a producer and somebody who makes video packages. He never wanted to be a professional wrestler. He wanted to be somebody who made video packages. He went to school for video editing, and he thought that, the WWE video packages before matches are some of the best. He wants to know how to do that. The only way that he knew how, outside of getting the education, was to get in the business. He thought the best way to get close to wrestling is to get into wrestling. So he became a professional wrestler. That got him some interviews to WWE so that he could be a producer. No better. Who's going to know how to produce a video package for a pay-per-view, for a big feud, better than somebody who's in the world of wrestling? Sure. Well, apparently that is the reason WWE gave him why he was not hired, because he was a wrestler, because he was too close to being a wrestler. They wanted somebody who just had the video producing and editing and all that marketing experience behind
that's
that.
Ridiculous.
And that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous that you are being punished for being a professional wrestler. We talked about this last week with the whole new who's coming in NXT style, less independent wrestlers, more football players and athletes and people who have no wrestling background. And again, the fact that you're saying that you're going out of your way to turn down wrestlers to take in non-wrestlers. I mean, I love WWE, and the one thing that WWE's got going for it, and the reason we all still watch it, is its lineage, its history. It's easier to watch, a team that's been around the sport for much longer than jump on with an expansion team, because they don't have that history. There's the reason the Tampa Bay Rays, they could win the World Series this year, but they don't got Monument Park. They don't have a Throwback Thursday where they wear hats from the 1950s. Because they weren't around. They don't have that history. You can't go back and talk to your grandfather about Tampa Bay Rays games. AEW, that's the negative for them right now. But unfortunately, that negative is not going to be around forever if WWE keeps doing this kind of stuff. Having WrestleMania and the Royal Rumble of the world, it's not going to be enough to keep the hardcore adult fans invested in WWE, especially when they hear things like we're not invested in wrestling essentially in general.
Yeah, it's a little ridiculous what WWE is doing these days. And now that you tell me that story about that individual, the reason why he didn't get the gig is because he has the background of wrestling. Isn't that what you want? Don't you want somebody that's well versed in different things? Yes, they could be a great videographer, video editor, video producer, whatever. They can do the back of the truck stuff, back behind the scenes stuff, but they also could be in the ring. Why wouldn't you want that? You get multiple perspectives. In WWE, that's ridiculous. WWE's doing that.
He didn't want to be in the ring. He wanted the ring to get him to the to get him closer to WWE. And they said
that's a good thing. I like this guy for doing that. I think it's great that this guy was doing that, and that sucks that he gets punished because yes, even though he doesn't want to be in the ring, he took the initiative and say, you know what? I have the video editing background. I have that perspective. I want to get the in-ring perspective as well. Put them together and be the best video editor in the business. And if you don't like somebody that does that, I don't know what WWE wants at this point. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it just seems like they have the wrong man in charge. We're talking about Nick Khan, and it just seems from a fan's perspective. I haven't heard anybody say anything grand about Nick Khan. I don't hear anybody talking about Nick Khan in any positive ways.
There's one person that I know that likes Nick Khan. Eric Bischoff is a big fan of Nick Khan. I will add to that. I've listened to Eric Bischoff's 83 Weeks podcast every week. They have a show. I listen to it every week. I mean, he's talked about Nick Khan. He's very high on Nick Khan. So I mean, there is one person out there. Eric Bischoff does. He does hold a lot of weight in the business because of what he's done for the business, the Monday Night Wars, just doing what he's done for many years in the business. So I respect his opinion, but I do disagree. I think Nick Khan is not. He's not looking out for WWE as overall. I think he's looking at it from more. I love the business side of it. Don't get me wrong, but it's more of a financial thing versus. I don't know. I don't think he understands the entertainment side of the business. I don't get it. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, and I think he also probably understands. When you say he doesn't understand the entertainment side, I think the problem is he could be too focused on the entertainment. And I've heard this before, and thankfully this was like a blip in the radar. But I remember it was maybe 20 years ago now, could be 15 years ago, right around the time that WWE turned into WWE from WWF. I remember hearing Vince McMahon being quoted as saying, and this was around the time where they got in the film industry and John Cena with the Marine and See No Evil, saying that he could envision a day where WWE did not have a wrestling ring and or wrestling. Like it was going to be some sort of other kind of show that involved, just some sort of transformation that wrestling was the entertainment for a little bit, but now, it's going to be some sort of, I don't know, like essentially what we've seen in the Boneyard match and the Firefly Funhouse match and the House of Horrors match, stuff like that. But just that's your whole show. Your whole show is stuff like that. Similar to what I think we're actually going to be getting a taste of really soon. There is going to be, I don't know if you heard about The Undertaker making his return with the New Day and some sort of cinematic, what is it called, Finding the Undertaker or some sort of nonsense like that.
The New Day, yeah. I have no interest. I have zero interest in it.
We'll see if The Undertaker makes a return at Madison Square Garden. That's where Smackdown is tonight as of recording. Big Super Smackdown tonight at Madison Square Garden. Edge and Seth Rollins. I imagine that it's Madison Square Garden return, which is great because I think WWE's been relying a little too much on the Barclays Center the last couple of years. Yeah. I don't know what the reason is. The rent's too high at Madison Square Garden. It's ridiculous. Whatever the rent is, it's your home. It is your home. It's like the Yankees saying we're going to play all more games at Citi Field because the rent's too high at Yankee Stadium. You got to
go to your home base once in a while.
They just built this Polar Park in Worcester, Massachusetts. It's like a great, awesome new minor league park, and it's super cheap. Let's play some home games there and forget about Fenway Park for a couple of years. No, that's ridiculous. WWE, your home is Madison Square Garden. It is. I don't care what it costs to run there. The history that you now have at Barclays Center, that's great. But let's get back to MSG. That's where you should be performing when you're in New York City. That's the Mecca right there. I mean, WrestleMania weekend when the Hall of Fame was at Barclays Center and all the other events were at Barclays Center. I went to Ring of Honor and New Japan Wrestling at MSG. Not so much because I wanted to see them over NXT or the Hall of Fame or anything, but I wanted to see wrestling at Madison Square Garden, which I hadn't ever seen before. So I would have went to WWE if they were at the Garden, and if New Japan was out at the Barclays Center, I would have skipped out on that. But with that being said, WWE is making their way to Madison Square Garden on September the 10th, one night before the 20th anniversary of September the 11th. And WWE just came out with a documentary about how they were, the first major mass gathering after September the 11th, 2 days after on Thursday, September the 13th in Houston at the Compaq Center, because SmackDown was scheduled to be taped on Tuesday, and obviously it got postponed. And I'm going to say this. This will be my opinion. I'm not going to say this is your opinion, Brandon. I'm not speaking for anybody else. I'm saying for this. I think this and the pandemic, WWE are putting these two things together. And I'm sorry, listen, I'm going to watch the documentary. I haven't watched it yet. I'm very interested in it. It should be a good watch. But WWE has painted the picture for both this and the pandemic of they are the savior who decided to bring everyone back together, who have decided to do things in tough times because that's what the people want. That's what the fans want. They wanted SmackDown 2 nights after September 11th, 2001, because we wanted to return to normalcy. We wanted to be the leader when it comes to returning to sporting events. WWE, I'm sorry, if you didn't do what you just did with the pandemic, or you didn't do what you've done with so many things in the past, aka Owen Hart's death and everything else, I might believe you. But I gotta believe that the reason you returned to normalcy and the reason why you never even had a Raw or SmackDown debut postponed or delayed during the pandemic is because of one thing and one thing only. You honor contracts very well, and you love the almighty dollar.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's you were absolutely spot on, dude. It's one of those things. I mean, I can't believe it's been 20 years. Tomorrow for 9/11. I remember exactly where I was. I was in middle school. I was in gym class, and everything went down. It's still vivid in my mind, and it's crazy to think that kids that are graduating high school these days weren't even born yet. That's just how it, and so it's like we have to teach our the newer generation of kids, what really happened. We're going to be historians because we went through it, kind of like our great grandparents and grandparents went through World War II, the Vietnam War, all these different things. We're going to be the historians, and I have to agree with you 110%. I think the way you portrayed that, I would have said the exact same thing. I think it's at the end of the day, it's the almighty dollar. They're going to paint this picture, like you said. To me, at the end of the day, they're going to honor contracts. They're going to make their money. And you know what? I'm grateful that they did put on these shows for us, so we had some sort of entertainment. But like you said, let's not get it twisted that they're the almighty savior. They're the ones that did everything in that aspect. No, they're doing it for the money. They're doing it, they're doing it for entertainment, which I appreciate. But at the end of the day, let's not get it twisted. It's all for business. It's not for anything else. But I am appreciative. I remember the shows, and I remember all the shows during the pandemic, more recently. So I'm thankful for that. But you are absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. It's all about the almighty dollar, and that's the shameful part. And again, it's 20 years later. I just can't believe it.
See, and because there's just too many examples. Like, they always just happen to be, like I said, with Owen Hart's death and everyone saying, why didn't you stop the show? Or even Brian Pillman's death right before one of the pay-per-views. And, Vince, you like to say, well, we were just also shocked and we were all just so taken back. We didn't know what to do, so we just kept wrestling. We're wrestlers, so we just keep wrestling. That's just in our blood. We don't know we didn't know stop. We didn't know, it was too much.
Hey, don't forget, Chris Benoit, too. Don't forget about the Chris Benoit situation, too. I mean, obviously, they didn't know at that point when the pay-per-view was going on, there was just like a no-call, no-show. Obviously, everything happened the way it did. But again, you're right. These matches went on. And here's the thing. If you watch Peacock these days and you watch that final show that the night that Owen Hart passed away back in 1999, they have edited it pretty well. But let's not forget, you still got the bloodstain on the mat. And I don't care what anybody says. How the hell can somebody say, I'm going to go in the ring and I'm going to step over the ropes where that man just died? Like, to me, I always say it was distasteful. You can tell the fans we had an unfortunate situation. We're calling this off. We'll refund you and we're going to reschedule this. Because it's even to this day, 22 years later, to me, it still leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And that's why especially Owen Hart's immediate family there, that's why they don't have a relationship really with WWE. We've all known that. That's part of it, because they felt disrespected. And I mean, Bret Hart, Bret Hart feels that way. That's the God's honest truth. That's his baby brother. So like for WWE to do all these things, like you said, it's all about the money grab. It has nothing to do with bringing themselves up. It's only raising how much money they're making. It's just a money grab is really what it is.
Refund the tickets and rescheduled the show in Houston. They originally scheduled to tape Smackdown on September the 11th. So they ended up just having it live on Thursday. But yeah, they didn't just have it. Here's the thing. They didn't have it live on Thursday and then say, okay, Monday though is postponed. We just had a special edition show, but we're not going to have a show on Monday. We're going to take a couple weeks off. We just wanted to show you that we can come back, do something big. And then no, they literally went right back to business on Monday, right back to business the following Tuesday for SmackDown. I would even look it up. I'm not sure, but were there even house shows, maybe even after that SmackDown for that weekend? Again, if WWE had some sort of example where something catastrophic happened and they stopped the show, they gave everyone their money back and they just said, we're done. And then they took a week or two off because of anything, whether it be what happened in 1990 in the war situation with America and Iraq then, 9/11, Owen Hart. If they had any example that I could look to where they said, hey, they took the time off. They said, you know what? We're not going to put on a show tonight because it's just not an appropriate time to do so. Then I might agree with them in some of these aspects. But because they've never done that, because they literally are just like, it's all just a coincidence. It's all a coincidence that they just kept going during the pandemic of like, well, we wanted to do it for entertainment purposes. Well, movies, other TV shows, other sporting events took time off, took weeks off. Football, I remember at that time, took that weekend off. And remember, football wasn't scheduled to happen, I believe, that week until Saturday and Sunday that week. So that was the first football games weren't even scheduled to be taking place for 6 or 7 days after. And yet they still took that weekend off. So they essentially didn't play baseball, basketball, football for like 20 days after September the 11th. WWE came back 2 days later and they want to come out and say they did it for the fans and they did it for the country. Listen. I like wrestling. A lot of people like wrestling. But the one thing I will say that doesn't bring this country together, the one thing that is, and it probably tore people apart a little bit, is in a sense, back in the day, the Attitude Era, is wrestling. It's not, ballet. It is not the opera. It is kind of rednecky, kind of, hard-hitting, grungy, sexy, wild. It's professional wrestling. It's MTV. It's MTV style entertainment from the 90s. It's Jackass. It's the Osbournes. It's all that kind of stuff rolled into one. I like it, but don't come out here and say during a real tragedy and something that, a real American catastrophic event that people are going to turn to World Wrestling Federation at that time, to bring you together. And if it was college football or it was some sort of, I guess, more respected institution, then it might be a little better as well. But the fact that it's wrestling, it's like if, Monster Trucks came out and said that, they decided to hold the show on September the 12th to bring the country together. The country didn't need grave diggers stomping out cars in a mud pit, and expect that to bring the country together. As much as we professional wrestling, watching Stone Cold stun The Rock with a bunch of beer and a bunch of boobs and bra and panties matches, I don't think you're really the beacon savior of bringing the country together after 9/11, because that's the kind of entertainment that you can bring to the table. I don't want to sound like an elitist. I like professional wrestling, but when I watch bra and panty matches and all these matches, with women wrestling around in gravy in the year 2001, I didn't think if we have somebody who's supposed to be the spokesperson of bringing America back together after a tragedy. Sorry, Vince. I think it's time for maybe you, just out of good taste, to have been the one to come back the longest. Let other things maybe come back sooner and let, things, I guess, transpire a little better before wrestling came back to the forefront and we had that kind of entertainment.
I do want to add a little bit, though, to this. So I respect, and in some aspects I do respect the fact that the show must go on. I do respect in some aspects, not completely all aspects. I appreciate the fact that, we did have this entertainment. We had something to kind of block out the world for a little, for a 2-hour show, that's, to me, like you mentioned, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, in 2001, 20 years ago, I'm not going to lie to you. I was what, 11, 12, 12 years old. So bra and penny matches were good for me. I mean, hey, I enjoyed them as a preteen. That's fine.
It's strange that Vince McMahon, though, like he's coming out here during the pandemic, during September the 11th, 2001, and he's kind of like coming out and saying, "Oh, we're doing this to bring people together and put smiles on people's faces." And it's like, listen, you're important to wrestling fans, absolutely, but to the generalization of the world, the WWE isn't as important, I guess, as they think that they are. And it goes to the fact that they want as much TV time every single week that they are. The fact that they make WrestleMania 7 hours. It's like this self-importance that they think, listen, wrestling fans love wrestling, but I mean, how many live new hours of content do they produce every week? Like, 10 hours of content. Wrestling fans, we like wrestling. I like it. I like baseball and wrestling and football and sitcoms and variety shows and Saturday Night Lives and all these kind of shows. I think wrestling needs to realize that they're a part of that pie. They're a part of that entertainment aspect. They sometimes take a little too much out when, they have Raw being 3 hours every single week, when some of us, with football season coming up and baseball season still going on, like to watch other things, like to not just give all our attention to wrestling.
Wait, hold on. I got to stop you there. So me watch football over wrestling? I mean, we've talked about this on previous episodes. I mean, is that really something I do?
I mean, I've been watching baseball this past week over wrestling as well. So to not get too off topic, though, it just goes to the fact that, I'll watch this documentary that WWE put out about returning to Smackdown following September the 11th, how they were the first mass gathering of any kind since that day. But I'll also say you got to take it with a grain of salt. Vince McMahon didn't do it for charity. I don't think he donated all the money from that event to charity. I don't think he put Smackdown on UPN that week because the goodness of his heart, he put it on because he doesn't want to miss a show. The same reason why Smackdown took place from the Performance Center when the world shut down that week. And instead of saying, hey, we got to cancel this week's show in New Orleans, no Smackdown this Friday night, maybe people can watch the news because there's a thing called the pandemic going on. Maybe they might be more interested in that.
If you're not seeing me on video, if you're on the audio side, I'm showing the Johnny Manziel money sign. At the end of the day, it's all about the greenbacks to Vince. And I hate saying that, but it's true.
Take 5 months off during the pandemic. They were going to return eventually. But they never missed even one show. That they didn't say, let's come back April 1st and we'll bring people entertainment again once we got this figured out. Let them figure some stuff out themselves. And then we'll come back April the 1st and bring back the entertainment that you love. But the fact that they never missed one show, the fact that they never even acknowledged COVID on television and they went right into SmackDown 2 days after the world shut down and just went on from the Performance Center with no crowd, but went on like nothing was happening. And, I respect that September 11th show was more of a tribute show and they didn't continue with the storylines. But come that Monday, they returned right back to the storylines and moved on while others were still on pause. And I just want to say, take that with a grain of salt. Anytime you think the WWE's doing anything for the sake of fans and smiles on faces, they like that almighty dollar. Probably first.
I got to take this back on a more positive side. I have to ask you before we get this wrapped up. What match did you enjoy the most on AEW's All Out this past weekend? There's a few that I really enjoyed, but I have one in my head that I think you're going to agree with me with. But I want to hear what you have to say.
I want to say the cage match, Young Bucks and Luchas. That was probably my favorite match. I like a good old-fashioned cage match. I think with the Elimination Chamber and Hell in a Cell, I applaud even WWE for this past year's WrestleMania putting a cage match on the event. Some people say it's passé. We've graduated on from it, but I think something reason we watch WWE, the history behind it, the fact that WrestleMania's got all this history. It's not just about the here and now. It's about the real sport feel of the lineage of it. Well, so I agree with AEW putting on a cage match more than a Hell in a Cell match or a cage match with barbed wire. I like a traditional cage match. I enjoyed seeing that at All Out.
Yeah, that match went over 20 minutes as well, so that was a good match. I have to tell you though, I really got to say CM Punk and Darby Allin. I just want to take that back. I believe that match was a 15-minute plus match. So for CM Punk, after all this time away from the squared circle, to put on almost a 20-minute match in his return, that's pretty cool. And it was a good match from start to finish. There was one thing I want to add to this. The one match we could have done without, I think we agree on this. We didn't need Paul White and QT Marshall. That was a waste of, whatever it was, 3-5 minutes, whatever it was. That was a waste of time. We didn't need that match.
The match that was gonna go off the show, I guess, if they did somehow run out of time. That match was all dictated upon other matches.
Sure.
And I kind of feel like if we have matches on pay-per-view cards that are dictated by other matches, maybe they shouldn't even be on the card in general. If they're just going to be there as like filler. If they're there, if the length of the match is going to be dictated upon other matches that are more important, then maybe we shouldn't have the match at all. And you can kind of say this, and I understand that he's a little bit older and his role is not going to be the same, but you can kind of say, take us back to the beginning of the show. I mean, that kind of shows you, big show, big debut, big name in AEW, but what are we doing with him? What is his actual importance?
Here's the thing. I got to cut you off. I got to cut you off a little bit there. Really quick, with Paul White, no more BS. I love the play on Big Show BS. Here's the thing. It would have been better if you didn't have him in a match with QT Marshall. I'm sorry. I'll say it in every episode of this show. AEW should just have QT Marshall not be in the ring. He's not good. He's not entertaining. He is to me. He needs to not be in the ring. He's like their worst asset. And I know he's boys with all the guys there. I get that. He's probably a nice guy, but he's just not entertaining. His matches aren't good. For me, I don't mind the way AEW uses the legacy talent or the legend talent, like the Stings, the Paul Whites, the Mark Henrys. You use them in spots. You don't overexpose. They're doing it pretty well, except here. Why the hell do we need Paul White wrestling QT Marshall? It does nothing for anybody. For anything, it makes Paul White look like shit because you're in a match with QT Marshall of all people. But again, I like what AEW has done with these legacy talents. They do it way better than anybody else, and that is including WWE, because WWE doesn't know what the hell they're doing with legacy or legendary talents, aside from one guy recently, and that's the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Aside from that, WWE's been dropping the ball on the legends or legacy talent for a long time.
All right, so that's going to do it for this week's edition of the show. Next week, we will see if AEW can win that key demographic for a second week in a row, as they did this week against Monday Night Raw, the 18 to 49 demographic. They won that on Monday Night Raw this week for Dynamite. Let's see what they can do next week as the war of WWE versus AEW is starting to heat up. Is it a war? We'll find out if AEW can keep up, if it becomes a war. And so much more in the world of WWE as we head into the Extreme Rules pay-per-view in just a few weeks. We know that Roman and Finn Balor are going to fight again for the championship, a good match we saw last week on Smackdown. So we'll talk that and so much more and anything else that comes up in the world of professional wrestling. For Brandon, I'm Jared, and this has been another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast.